Hey y'all, so today we're talking about a feature that's new in Unity 6 that is build profiles. So for those of you that have been setting up Unity projects for many years, it's always been a bit of a beast to change out the order of your scenes per build. If you're trying to troubleshoot a specific scene, you'd basically have to make that edit to your build settings, build it, and then revert all of your changes back to your standard build out. It's very clunky. This new build profile allows you to essentially set up different profiles for different end targets that you want to build to, as well as different intentions for your build. So if you're wanting to debug a specific level, you can create a profile just to debug that level without messing up your build settings for the game as a whole. So first thing I always do is I have the documentation pulled up. We're not going to go through all of this in this video just to keep it short and sweet, but I will put the link to this in the description below. So the very first thing that I'm going to do is open up a project inside of Unity 6. I'm in 6000.0.20f1, and I'm going to grab a new template that I've never used before. So between the 2D platformer microgame and the FPS microgame, I'm going to grab the 2D platformer. I'm going to download it, open my project, and I'll see you in Unity. All right, so we are now in the project. Let's just hit play, make sure that everything runs before we spend too much time on build profiles. Looks good. Okay, so we won't run the whole level, but it looks like the core mechanics are working. Death resets us. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and hit stop, and we want to go over to File and Build Profiles. So this is more or less taken over what you remember as the build settings window, but has all of the same features within it. These are the platforms that I already have pre-installed on this version of the Unity editor. So let's say that I wanted to build out to web. I can just come over here and click on install with Unity Hub, and it will open up for me the adding modules to this specific version of Unity with that specific support already checked. So I'm going to go ahead and hit install, and let's get that installed just so that I have a different build target than what I'm used to. And while web is installing, I'm going to go ahead and do the same for Android as well. So I'm going to click on install with Unity Hub. All right, so we just had those finish installing. Let's pull back up Unity Editor and take a look. So I still don't see them in here, so all that I'm going to do is close this down and reopen the project, and you should see them there at that point. All right, so it just popped up, so let's go ahead and go to File, Build Profiles, and now we can see that we do have both Android and web as build targets. Now in this one, I really only have one scene, so we're not needing to do a bunch of scene management, but let's dive in anyways. So taking a look at build profiles, first thing to note is that scene list up here is going to be a kind of universal scene list. This is what you'll be using if you have not dictated a scene list within a build profile and you're not building with a profile itself, but instead just up here with any of these platforms. There's also player settings and a few other settings that you can get into up here. So as we look through this, we can see different specific details. You'll also get into a lot of this information down within the build profile itself. So I'm going to go ahead and create our first build profile. What you're looking at here actually has no build profiles yet. So you have the build profile category, and I'm going to hit add. And let's just make our first one a Windows build. And from here, I'm just going to add my open scenes. One main thing to cover here that I'm probably not going to do a demo on, given that I'm just not a terrific programmer, as many of you know, is scripting defines. So scripting defines are basically custom modifiers that you can do with custom symbols inside of your scripts to indicate specific predetermined ways of testing or debugging. So an example that I would give would be, I want to turn on a no clip God mode if I have this script turned on that's a cheat code, something like that. Or an example that I saw, I can actually show in a minute here, involves a script that is a modifier for like a nitro boost in a racing game that you don't want to give to everybody. So let's take a look at that right now. So this is what it will typically look like. This is from a video that I will link in the description below from Unity. And essentially it's a hash if, and then your modifier here, your scripting defines, then do this, and then a hash end. So it's not too much more complicated than that. And you can see right there we have a hash if and then a hash end if. And that's the long and short of it. Okay, so now that we've looked at a few of those, I'm going to leave everything here. If I have a player settings override, I can create an override within this profile. So I can come in here and change out things like the icon, the splash image, etc. Let's say next I want to duplicate this and maybe switch profile. And now we're actually going to load up this Windows profile. And let's say in this one, I just want to change out the splash image or the resolution, default screen width. So let's say that's 1920 by 1080. And I can make a few other changes. You can see how this would become useful pretty quickly. So this one I would then rename varied screen width. And then I'm going to come over here and create a new build profile, throw one in here for Android, add that, and we will leave this as is, just add in our open scene. And let's say if I really wanted to, something clever here might be so that I can visually see the difference. Maybe I have a separate scene. And in this separate scene, I'm going to rename and call this red. And maybe for some reason on some platforms, I want my character not to be this blue. So I can come in here, make my character maybe like a red, and then I'll go ahead and hit save. And now when I come back over here to build profiles, not build and run, but build profiles, I could come in here and I could remove that selection. And instead I could add into Android my red scene. And now within this profile, it's going to build out to this. So we have a lot of settings in here that we can get into. If we had different levels of devices that we wanted to have 7 different Android profiles for, we can do that as well. And then maybe one last build profile that I want to build is web. So let me go ahead and add that. We'll make it the red scene, why not? And I'll just call that good. And let's say I want to switch profiles to web. And it's going to go ahead and take care of all of that for me and not mess up any of my other profiles. It won't change any of the settings within those profiles. So it's a really nice way to keep everything kind of bite-sized and compartmentalized inside of your build settings. So once it's made this change, I'm just going to go ahead and hit build and show you what that looks like to build out of this build profiles window. And then we'll be good to go. All right, so now that it has officially moved over to this build profile, I'm going to go ahead and hit build and run. From in here, I'm just going to create a web folder and we'll select it. And it's now going to build out. Once it builds, I'll check in. All right, so just like that, the build has now built out and launched itself into localhost for now until I actually host it somewhere different. So it was that easy to switch between build profiles. Let's go ahead and just make sure that the game is working and test it very quickly. Everything looks good. Sound is working. I actually don't have the sound piping through. I can turn it on briefly. All right, so now just to not make this a video about this 2D platformer game, we'll go ahead and close it out, but I think that is the coolest thing. The fact that I can switch between end targets, I can switch between builds that I want to test specific levels or specific features or specific things within the player settings, platform settings. You can do all that from here. The other nice thing is that this actually creates an asset within your project. So if I come down into here, we can actually look at, I believe it's in settings, underneath assets, you now have a build profiles folder. And these are things that with Unity version control or Git or whatever you're using, you can now commit these to the repo, and anybody else can use these build profiles in their projects. So I hope that this was helpful. We went over what build profiles are, where the documentation is, how to use them, what doing a scene list and scripting defines is comprised of, and then you can look at all the different settings within each. I hope you give it a shot. It's definitely worth the upgrade to Unity 6 with features like this that make my life so much easier. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe, please. I hope you're having a great day, and I'll see y'all in the next one.